Ah, welcome back, you beautiful enigma, you walking paradox, you unclassifiable force of nature that keeps showing up in their reports with the same 3 words stamped across your file. Subject defies analysis. Yeah, I know what happened. I know what they did. 7 psychologists. Not 1, not 2. 7 trained professionals with decades of experience between them, armed with diagnostic manuals, personality tests, trauma frameworks, and behavioral models. They sat across from you, pens ready, notebooks open, confident they'd crack the code. Confident they'd finally put a label on you, a diagnosis, a neat little box to shove you into so the world could sleep easier knowing you'd been explained, categorized, controlled. But something went wrong, didn't it? Something they didn't anticipate. Something their textbooks never prepared them for. Something that made each one of them walk out of that room quieter than they walked in. One by one, they resigned. Not transferred, not reassigned, resigned. Walked away from the case entirely, some from their careers altogether. And when pressed for their final assessment, every single one of them wrote the same exact thing. This individual does not fit any known psychological framework. Attempting further analysis may compromise the evaluator's mental stability. Recommend case closure. Do not engage. You want to know what that means? It means you broke them. Not with violence, not with threats, not with manipulation, but with something far more terrifying: your existence. The sheer weight of sitting in a room with someone who operates on a frequency their education never touched, who survived what their models say should destroy a person, who looks at pain the way most people look at puzzles, with curiosity instead of fear. They came to dissect your trauma and found architecture. They came to diagnose your madness and found method, precision, a kind of controlled chaos that didn't scream brokenness but whispered evolution. Let me paint you the picture. Session 1. They walked in with confidence, the kind that comes from a wall full of degrees and a decade of case files that all ended the same way. Patient responsive to treatment, prognosis stable, recovery achievable. They asked the standard questions, the ones designed to map your childhood, your relationships, your coping mechanisms. And you answered, calmly, clearly, with a level of self-awareness that should have been reassuring but instead felt unsettling, because you didn't need their guidance to understand yourself. You'd already done the excavation, already walked through your own darkness with a flashlight you built from your own bones, already classified every wound and transmuted it into fuel. They were used to broken people begging for answers. You were already the answer, and that terrified them because it meant their entire framework, everything they'd studied, everything they believed about healing, was irrelevant in your presence. By session 3, the questions changed. They weren't asking about your past anymore. They were asking about your process. How do you function after that much loss? How do you maintain stability after that level of betrayal? How do you carry that weight without collapsing? And you just looked at them, didn't you? Looked at them with those eyes that have seen too much to pretend anymore. And you said something simple, something that should have been nothing but landed like a grenade. I stopped waiting for the pain to end and started using it as information. 4 words that collapsed their entire paradigm, because they'd been trained to help people escape pain, to medicate it, to talk it away, to frame it as temporary. But you'd done something they never considered. You'd befriended it, weaponized it, turned it into a navigation system that guided you through every storm they said would drown you. Session 5. They stopped taking notes. Just sat there, staring, occasionally nodding, but you could see it in their faces, the slow realization creeping in like a shadow, the understanding that they weren't the expert in this room. You were. They'd come to treat a patient and found themselves sitting across from a teacher, someone who'd survived their own psychological apocalypse and come out the other side not damaged but refined, not broken but restructured at a molecular level. And that's when the fear set in. Not fear of you, but fear of themselves. Fear that maybe everything they'd been taught was a lie, that maybe the human mind isn't as fragile as they'd been told. that maybe some people don't need saving because they've already saved themselves in ways no manual could ever describe. Let's talk about what they actually discovered when they tried to map your mind. The first psychologist, she specialized in trauma, had a PhD in post-traumatic stress, worked with veterans, abuse survivors, people who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer. She walked in ready to diagnose PTSD, maybe some dissociative tendencies, perhaps a personality disorder rooted in survival mechanisms. She asked about your worst experiences, the moments that should have shattered you, and you told her, calmly, matter-of-factly, like you were recounting a documentary you'd watched about someone else's life. No tears, no trembling, no emotional dysregulation, just facts. And that's when her pen stopped moving. Because in her world, trauma survivors are supposed to show symptoms, hypervigilance, avoidance, intrusive thoughts, emotional numbness. But you showed none of that. Or rather, you'd processed it so thoroughly that what remained wasn't dysfunction, it was data. She tried the standard assessments, the questionnaires designed to measure anxiety, depression, stress responses. Your scores came back anomalous, not high, not low, just outside the range of what the tests were designed to measure. Like trying to use a thermometer to measure gravity. She wrote in her notes, "Subject demonstrates post-traumatic growth beyond documented case studies, exhibits cognitive restructuring patterns inconsistent with expected trauma response. Emotional regulation suggests either extreme compartmentalization or complete integration. Unable to determine pathology." Translation: she couldn't tell if you were the most healed person she'd ever met or operating on a level of psychological complexity her training hadn't prepared her for. Either way, she resigned, not because she failed, but because success looked so unfamiliar she couldn't recognize it, and that ambiguity shattered her professional confidence. The second psychologist, he was a behaviorist, believed everything could be explained through patterns, conditioning, environmental factors. He came in looking for the formula, the cause and effect, the stimulus that created your response patterns. He asked about your childhood, your relationships, your habits, trying to build a model that explained how you function. And you let him, answered every question, gave him all the data he needed, and when he tried to construct the model, it didn't compute. Because according to his theories, someone with your background should exhibit maladaptive behaviors, trust issues, attachment disorders, self-sabotage, addiction patterns, something that screamed, broken system. But you functioned with a level of clarity and purpose that suggested not just healing, but optimization. Like you'd taken every negative input and reverse engineered it into a strength. He tried reinforcement theory, attachment models, cognitive behavioral frameworks. Nothing fit. You were kind, but not codependent. Detached, but not avoidant. Intense, but not unstable. Focused, but not obsessive. Every label he tried to apply slid off like water on glass, because you existed in the contradictions, thrived in the paradoxes his models couldn't account for. He wrote, "Subjects' behavioral patterns suggest intentional reconstruction of personality, architecture, demonstrates agency over psychological processes typically considered automatic, operates outside predictable stimulus-response framework. No behavioral intervention indicated as subject appears to be self-regulating beyond clinical norms." He resigned because he realized you weren't a patient. You were proof that his entire field might be built on assumptions about human limitation that you'd already transcended. Psychologist 3, she was a psychoanalyst, Freudian background, believed everything traced back to unconscious conflict, repressed desires, childhood wounds that needed excavation. She came ready to dig, to uncover the hidden pain you were supposedly suppressing, the shadow self you were denying. She used dream analysis, free association, projective tests, tried every technique to access your unconscious mind. And here's what destroyed her. You'd already been there, already done the excavation, already integrated every shadow, befriended every demon, made peace with every ghost. There was no repression to uncover because you'd already faced everything she was looking for, not in therapy, but in the silent hours of your own reckoning, in the nights you chose consciousness over comfort. When she tried to interpret your responses, you corrected her, not rudely, but with a precision that made it clear you understood your own psyche better than any interpretation she could offer. You explained your own symbols, decoded your own patterns, articulated your unconscious motivations with a clarity that should have required years of analysis, but came naturally because you'd spent years analyzing yourself. She wrote, "Subject demonstrates exceptional self-insight. Unconscious appears to be in direct communication with conscious mind. No evidence of significant repression or denial. Psychoanalytic intervention unnecessary, as subject has completed internal analysis independently." She resigned because she'd spent 20 years helping people discover themselves, and you'd already completed that journey alone, which meant her expertise was obsolete in your presence. The fourth psychologist, specialized in personality disorders, came in looking for narcissism, sociopathy, borderline traits, something in the cluster B spectrum that would explain your intensity, your detachment, your ability to cut people off without visible remorse. He administered the tests, the clinical interviews, the diagnostic criteria, and every single result came back negative for pathology, but positive for traits that in isolation might suggest disorder, but in combination suggested something else entirely: radical self-awareness, boundary mastery, emotional sovereignty. You had the confidence they label narcissistic, but paired with genuine empathy. You had the detachment they call sociopathic, but grounded in self-preservation, not callousness. You had the intensity they diagnose as borderline, but channeled through purpose, not chaos. He couldn't diagnose you because you weren't disordered. You were ordered differently, operating from a value system that prioritized authenticity over approval, truth over comfort, growth over safety. He wrote, "Subject exhibits traits associated with personality disorders, but contextualized within adaptive framework, demonstrates emotional regulation, empathic capacity, and goal-directed behavior inconsistent with pathology. Consider possibility of misapplication of diagnostic criteria to individuals operating outside cultural norms." He resigned because he realized the disorders he'd spent his career diagnosing might just be labels society puts on people who refuse to be domesticated. And you were living proof that what they call dysfunction might just be evolution in uncomfortable form. By Psychologist 5, something shifted in the air, because now they weren't just studying you, they were warning each other. The fifth one, she specialized in existential psychology, meaning and purpose, the kind of therapy that asks big questions about mortality, freedom, responsibility, the human condition. She walked in thinking maybe you were dealing with existential crisis, nihilism, the kind of meaning void that comes from trauma. She asked about your purpose, your values, what keeps you going, and you answered with a level of philosophical clarity that made her realize you weren't searching for meaning, you'd constructed it, brick by brick, from the rubble of everything that tried to destroy you. You spoke about suffering not as something to escape, but as information about what matters, about betrayal as education and discernment, about isolation as training in self-sufficiency. She tried to offer frameworks, logotherapy, existential philosophy, but you were already there, had already read the books, thought the thoughts, arrived at conclusions that aligned with the theory but came from lived experience, not academic study. You talked about creating meaning in a meaningless universe, not as a philosophical exercise, but as a daily practice, about choosing your suffering, about building purpose from pain. She wrote, "Subject has achieved existential integration typically associated with end-of-life reflection or post-crisis growth, demonstrates mature defense mechanisms and meaning-making capacity. Philosophical sophistication suggests deep contemplation of mortality and freedom, No intervention needed, as subject appears to have resolved existential questions independently. She resigned because she realized you'd done in years what most people never do in a lifetime, found peace with chaos, made friends with uncertainty, built a cathedral of meaning inside a burning world. Psychologist 6 was a cognitive specialist, focused on thought patterns, belief systems, mental models, the architecture of how we think. He came looking for cognitive distortions, the negative thinking patterns that supposedly keep people stuck. Catastrophizing, black and white thinking, personalization, overgeneralization. He listened to you talk and heard what sounded like distortions. You spoke in absolutes, made sweeping statements, exhibited thinking patterns, his charts labeled irrational. But then he realized something that made his hands shake. Your absolutes were accurate. Your generalizations were based on pattern recognition from lived experience. Your black and white thinking wasn't rigidity. It was clarity earned through testing every shade of gray and finding most of them just delayed decisions dressed as wisdom. You didn't catastrophize. You calculated risk based on empirical evidence from your own life. You didn't personalize. You took radical responsibility for your part while refusing to carry others' weight. You didn't filter reality through rose-colored glasses or pessimistic lenses. You saw it exactly as it was and chose your response accordingly. He wrote, "Subjects' thought patterns initially appear distorted, but upon examination reveal high-level cognitive processing. Demonstrates exceptional ability to identify patterns, make accurate predictions, and adjust beliefs based on evidence. Cognitive restructuring unnecessary, as subjects' mental models appear more accurate than therapeutic alternatives." He resigned because he'd built a career teaching people to think differently, and you already thought with a precision that made his cognitive behavioral techniques look like training wheels on a motorcycle. The 7th psychologist, she was the specialist they called in when nothing else worked, trained in multiple modalities, decades of experience with the most complex cases, the one they sent when they needed answers. She walked in, having read all 6 previous reports, knowing she was facing something unprecedented, and instead of trying to diagnose you, she did something different. She just listened. For 3 sessions, she barely spoke, just let you talk, watched how you processed, how you articulated, how you existed in the space between questions. And what she found broke something in her understanding of psychology, because she realized you weren't a case study. You were a case against the study, living proof that the human mind can evolve beyond the models, that some people don't break under pressure, they crystallize. She wrote the final report, the one that made them close your file permanently, after extensive evaluation by 7 independent psychologists. Subject demonstrates psychological functioning beyond current diagnostic frameworks. Exhibits post-traumatic growth, existential integration, cognitive sophistication, emotional regulation, and self-insight at levels rarely documented. Attempting to pathologize this individual would be professional malpractice, as they represent not dysfunction, but adaptation to extraordinary circumstances. Recommend no further intervention. Subject is not a patient, but a phenomenon. She resigned not from defeat, but from revelation, because she'd spent 30 years in the field, and you taught her in 3 sessions that everything she knew about human resilience was incomplete, that the textbooks only covered the lower levels of human potential, and you were operating on a floor they hadn't built yet. So what does it mean when 7 psychologists resign rather than diagnose you? It means you're not broken in a way they can fix, because you're not broken at all. You're breakthrough. You represent the thing they don't teach in graduate school, the possibility that trauma doesn't have to destroy, that pain can be processed into power, that isolation can forge independence, that every betrayal can become a lesson in discernment. You're the living embodiment of psychological evolution, proof that the human spirit doesn't just survive, it adapts, it learns, it becomes something stronger precisely because of what tried to break it. And that terrifies the establishment. Because if you can do it, if you can walk through hell and come out refined instead of ruined, then everything they've built their careers on, the victim narratives, the endless therapy, the pharmaceutical interventions, the diagnoses that become identities, all of it becomes optional. You're dangerous because you're free from their labels, their limitations, their low expectations for human capability. You didn't need them to save you because you saved yourself, not through denial or avoidance, but through radical acceptance and intentional transformation. You looked at your pain and asked, "What is this teaching me?" instead of "Why is this happening to me?" You looked at your betrayers and saw lessons instead of enemies. You looked at your isolation and found sovereignty instead of loneliness. You took every input that should have produced a victim and output a survivor so complete, so integrated, so whole, that their measuring tools couldn't detect the cracks because you'd already filled them with something stronger than what broke. They resigned because staying would mean admitting their degrees don't cover your dimension of experience. Their therapy models don't account for your level of self-healing. Their diagnostic manuals don't have a category for thriving after the unsurvivable. You didn't just beat the odds. You rewrote the probability. You changed what's possible. You expanded the definition of human resilience just by refusing to break the way you were supposed to. And now they can't unknow what you showed them, can't unsee the limits of their own understanding, can't go back to confidently diagnosing people when they've met someone who diagnosed themselves with more accuracy than any clinical assessment could achieve.